Welcome to Golden Heart Stories, where quiet courage meets hard truth, and where justice always finds its way home. Tonight's story is one that asks us to look closely at the moments we think no one important is watching. It's about dignity, love, and the kind of reckoning that arrives without warning. As you listen, you may recognize places, faces, or even feelings you've carried for years. If a story like this has ever touched your life, take a moment to settle in and listen with an open heart. Before we begin, here's a gentle question to carry with you. If someone you love were being mistreated when you weren't around, would you know, and what would you hope happens when the truth finally comes out? Hook. The classroom went silent when the door opened, but not because the teacher asked for attention. It was because the man who stepped inside carried the kind of calm power that stops cruelty mid-sentence, and the girl being humiliated at the chalkboard was his daughter. Act 1 Dual Introduction. In the quiet, tree-lined suburb of Brookhaven Hills, the kind of neighborhood where American flags hung neatly from porch railings and neighbors waved politely without ever knowing each other too well, 12-year-old Naomi Carter sat stiffly in her seat at Jefferson Preparatory Academy. Jefferson Prep prided itself on excellence. The brochure spoke of legacy, discipline, and values. The hallways were lined with framed photos of graduating classes that all looked eerily similar. Naomi had learned, even at her young age, that being different here meant being watched. She smoothed her braids back with trembling fingers as Mrs. Linda Whitaker paced the front of the classroom, heels clicking sharply against polished tile. Mrs. Whitaker had taught fourth grade for nearly 20 years. Parents described her as traditional. Administrators called her firm. Naomi had already learned another word for it: unfair. Naomi, Mrs. Whitaker said, her voice clipped, eyes narrowing as she glanced down at the girl's worksheet. I've explained this 3 times. Maybe if you spent less time daydreaming and more time paying attention, you'd understand. A few kids snickered. Others stared at their desks, uncomfortable but silent. Naomi swallowed. I did what the book said, she whispered, holding the paper out with both hands. Mrs. Whitaker didn't take it. Reading comprehension is clearly not your strength, she replied loudly. Some children are just better suited to other kinds of learning. Naomi's face burned. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to tell her dad, but she never did. Her father was always traveling, always busy. And besides, she didn't want to be a problem. Across town, in a glass and steel office overlooking the city skyline, her father, Daniel Carter, adjusted his cufflinks as he ended a board call. Daniel Carter was a name that moved markets. A self-made billionaire CEO whose logistics and infrastructure company powered ports, hospitals, and supply chains across the country. Business magazines called him relentless. Competitors called him dangerous. His employees called him fair. But at that moment, none of that mattered to him as much as the framed photo on his desk. Naomi, missing her front teeth, grinning on a beach years ago. Her small hand wrapped around his finger. He checked his watch. He was late. Daniel had promised himself he would be more present. Fewer flights, fewer excuses. When Naomi had hesitated that morning before school, lingering by the door as if she wanted to say something, it had stayed with him all day like an unfinished sentence. He grabbed his coat. Back in the classroom, Mrs. Whitaker crossed her arms. Stand up, she said to Naomi. Naomi froze. So everyone can see the consequences of not keeping up, the teacher replied. As Naomi slowly rose, heart pounding, she felt every eye on her. She wondered, not for the first time, why being smart, polite, and quiet never seemed to be enough. And she had no idea that in less than 10 minutes, everything in that room and in Mrs. Whitaker's carefully controlled world was about to change. If this story already stirs something in you, you're not alone. Stories like these deserve to be told. If you believe quiet courage matters, consider subscribing to Golden Heart Stories and sharing your thoughts below. Your voice helps these stories reach the people who need them most. The hallway outside the classroom echoed with approaching footsteps. The door handle turned, and the past, the present, and the truth were about to collide. The door opened without a knock. Mrs. Whitaker turned sharply, irritation already forming on her lips. "Excuse me, this is a—" She stopped. The man who stepped into the room didn't rush. He didn't apologize. He stood tall in a tailored charcoal coat, silver just touching his temples. His presence quiet but unmistakable. The kind of man people instinctively straighten for, even if they didn't know why. "I'm looking for Naomi Carter," he said evenly. Naomi's breath caught. Her fingers curled into her palms. "That's me," she whispered, barely audible. Daniel Carter's eyes found her instantly. Not the cowboard, not the teacher. His daughter, standing alone beside her desk. Shoulders tight, chin lifted the way she did when she was trying not to cry. Something in his chest fractured. Mrs. Whitaker recovered first. "Sir, you can't just interrupt my class. If you're here about discipline, you'll need to make an appointment with the front office." Daniel didn't raise his voice. He took a single step forward. "Why is my daughter standing?" A pause stretched. Students shifted. One boy dropped his pencil. It clattered too loudly. Mrs. Whitaker cleared her throat. Naomi was having trouble following instructions. "I find public accountability helps children learn responsibility." Daniel looked at Naomi again. "Is that true?" Naomi hesitated. Years of being told not to make waves pressed down on her. She glanced at Mrs. Whitaker, then back at her father. Her voice trembled, but she spoke. "I did the assignment," she said. "She said I wasn't paying attention." Daniel nodded once. Slowly, he reached into his coat pocket and removed his phone, tapping the screen. "May I?" he asked, holding up the device. Mrs. Whitaker stiffened. "I don't allow recordings." "I'm not recording," Daniel replied. "I'm pulling up Naomi's academic file, with the school's permission, which I have." He turned the screen toward her. "Test scores, teacher comments, consistent excellence, top percentile in reading comprehension." Daniel continued calmly. "Advanced placement recommendation, no behavioral issues." Mrs. Whitaker's cheeks flushed. "Grades aren't everything. Some students need a structure." Daniel finally looked at her fully. His gaze was steady and blinking. "Structure is not humiliation." The room felt smaller. He placed a hand gently on Naomi's shoulder. "Sweetheart, sit down." She obeyed instantly, relief flooding her limbs. Daniel turned back to Mrs. Whitaker. "You will explain to me why my daughter has been singled out repeatedly, and you will do it now." The teacher opened her mouth, closed it. "Tried again. I treat all my students the same." Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then met her eyes. "That's interesting," he said softly. "Because the head of this school and the district superintendent are both on their way here, and they're very interested in hearing about the same." Mrs. Whitaker's confidence collapsed in real time, and Naomi, for the first time, saw something she would never forget. Her father standing between her and the world. The bell rang shrill and jarring. But no one moved. No one spoke. Justice had entered the room, and it wasn't finished yet. The hallway outside room 214 buzzed as students poured out for lunch. But inside, time seemed to thicken. Mrs. Whitaker straightened the stack of papers on her desk with trembling hands, clinging to routine as if it could anchor her. "This is being blown out of proportion," she said tightly. "I've taught for 2 decades. I don't need to be lectured on classroom management." Daniel didn't sit. He remained standing beside Naomi's desk. one hand resting lightly on the back of her chair. It was a small gesture, but to Naomi it felt like armor. "Then this won't take long," he replied. "Tell me why my daughter came home 3 times this month saying she felt small in your class." Naomi's eyes widened. She hadn't realized he knew. Mrs. Whitaker scoffed. "Children exaggerate. Naomi is sensitive. Some students struggle to adapt to rigorous environments." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Rigorous is not selective." The teacher folded her arms. "Are you implying something?" "I'm asking for clarity," Daniel said. "Because clarity protects everyone." Mrs. Whitaker's voice sharpened. "You can't walk in here flashing influence and expect special treatment. This school doesn't bend because of who a parent is." Daniel's lips curved slightly, but there was no warmth in it. "I didn't come here for special treatment. I came because my daughter was humiliated publicly, and because silence teaches children that cruelty is acceptable." Naomi stared at the floor. Hearing the words spoken aloud made her chest ache. She hadn't imagined it. She hadn't been weak. A knock broke the tension. The assistant principal, Mr. Hargreaves, poked his head in. "Mrs. Whitaker, the superintendent is here." The color rained from her face. "This is unnecessary," she insisted, lowering her voice. "We can resolve this internally." Daniel finally took a seat, slowly, deliberately. "You had many chances to resolve it internally." Mrs. Whitaker's resistance shifted into something harder, colder. "I won't be accused of racism because a child feels uncomfortable." Naomi's head snapped up. Daniel leaned forward. "Discomfort isn't the issue," he said quietly. "Pattern is." Footsteps approached. Voices murmured outside the door. Mrs. Whitaker's gaze flicked between Naomi and her father, something unreadable passing across her face. For the first time Naomi saw fear. And still, Mrs. Whitaker chose denial. "I stand by my methods," she said, "and I won't apologize for maintaining standards." Daniel exhaled slowly, as if steadying himself. "Then let's put everything on the table." The door opened wider, and the walls Mrs. Whitaker had hidden behind for years were about to come down. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper, the kind of room where difficult conversations were meant to happen quietly and quickly. Framed mission statements lined the walls, all words like integrity, excellence, community printed in elegant serif fonts. Daniel sat at one end of the long table, Naomi beside him. He had pulled her chair close enough that their arms touched. She didn't pull away. Across from them, Mrs. Whitaker sat rigid, her spine straight, her handbag clutched in her lap like a shield. The superintendent, Dr. Paul Reynolds, flipped open a folder. The assistant principal hovered near the door, suddenly very interested in the floor. "We're here to understand a pattern of concern," Dr. Reynolds began, measured and professional. "Mr. Carter, thank you for coming in." Daniel nodded. "I didn't plan to," he said, "but my daughter needed me." Dr. Reynolds glanced at Naomi. "Naomi, would you like to share anything in your own words?" Naomi's mouth went dry. The room felt too big, too important. She shook her head instinctively. Daniel didn't push. He leaned closer and spoke softly. "Just for her. You don't have to protect anyone today." That did it. Naomi swallowed hard. "She calls on me only when I'm wrong," she said quietly. "When I raise my hand and I'm right. She says I'm lucky when I do well. Like it's an accident." Mrs. Whitaker inhaled sharply. "That is not true." Naomi's voice trembled, but she continued. "She tells me my hair is distracting. She says I talk differently. She told me once that kids like me need thicker skin." Silence dropped heavy into the room. Dr. Reynolds stopped writing. Daniel didn't look at Mrs. Whitaker. He kept his eyes on his daughter. his hand now fully covering hers. "Thank you for telling the truth," he said. Mrs. Whitaker's composure cracked. "I was trying to prepare her for the real world," she said defensively. "Not everyone will coddle her." Daniel finally turned to her. "The real world is hard enough without adults teaching children they deserve less." Dr. Reynolds closed the folder. "Mrs. Whitaker, these concerns are serious. We'll need to place you on administrative leave pending review." Her eyes widened. "You can't do that over feelings." Dr. Reynolds' voice stayed calm. "We can, and we will." Naomi squeezed her father's hand. For the first time, the room didn't feel threatening, it felt honest. "If this moment resonates with you, if you've ever witnessed silence where there should have been protection, this is a powerful time to pause. Stories like this matter because they remind us we're not alone. A simple like or share helps keep these conversations alive." Mrs. Whitaker stood abruptly, chair scraping back. "I've given my life to this school." Daniel stood too, not in anger, in resolve. "Then you should have protected every child in it." As they walked out together, Naomi glanced back once, not in triumph, in release. And Daniel realized something quietly painfully true. He had arrived just in time. But there were still questions left unanswered. That evening, rain traced low lines down the windows of Daniel Carter's town car as it pulled into the circular drive of their home. The house sat on a gentle rise overlooking the river, old money architecture soft and by warm lights and mature oaks. It was elegant without being loud, powerful without trying to prove it. Naomi climbed out quietly, her backpack hanging heavier than usual on one shoulder. Inside, the house was hushed. No staff, no meetings. Daniel had sent everyone home. They sat at the kitchen island, a mug of cocoa steaming in front of Naomi. Untouched, Daniel watched her carefully, noticing things he'd missed before. The way she tucked her hands under her thighs. The way she avoided mirrors lately. The way her laughter had thinned over the past few months like it was rationed. "How long has it been happening?" he asked gently. Naomi shrugged. "Since the beginning of the year, maybe before." Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Guilt rose sharp and familiar. He had grown up in a two-bedroom apartment in Detroit. A scholarship kid. The only black student in honors classes where teachers assumed his success was luck or charity. He had learned early how silence could protect you short-term and wound you for life. "I should have seen it," he said quietly. Naomi looked up. "You were busy." "That's not an excuse," he replied. "That's a mistake." She hesitated, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded paper, smoothed and creased from being handled too often. It was an essay. "I wrote this," she said, "but I never turned it in." Daniel read slowly. It was about feeling invisible while being watched, about wanting to shrink and scream at the same time, about wondering if excellence was enough to earn kindness. His throat tightened. "Why didn't you turn it in?" he asked. Naomi's voice cracked. She said, "Stories like mine make people uncomfortable." Daniel set the paper down with care, as if it were fragile glass. "My father used to tell me something. He said, the world will try to teach you who you are. You don't have to accept the lesson." Naomi studied him. "Did you always believe that?" "No," he admitted, "but I learned it." He stood and walked to his office, returning with a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold bracelet. "My mother gave me this when I graduated college," he said. "She said, never let anyone make you feel smaller than your purpose." He clasped it around Naomi's wrist. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "What if I still feel scared?" Daniel knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he said. "It's knowing you're not alone in it." Outside, the rain softened. Something long and spoken finally had room to breathe. And for the first time, Naomi believed that what happened in that classroom would not be the end of her story but the beginning of something just. The following Saturday morning unfolded slowly, the way mornings used to before schedules ruled everything. Sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor as Naomi sat cross-legged at the table, sorting blueberries into neat piles while Daniel flipped pancakes at the stove, his sleeves rolled up like he had nowhere else to be. "You're burning them," Naomi said, a smile tugging at her mouth. Daniel glanced down, then laughed. A real laugh. "Your grandmother would be horrified." Naomi giggled, the sound lighter than it had been in months. "She always said pancakes tell the truth about a person." "What do mine say?" he asked, sliding a slightly lopsided one onto a plate. "That you're rich enough to order breakfast but stubborn enough to make it yourself." He raised an eyebrow. "Fair." They ate together, unhurried. No phone buzzing. No assistant knocking. Daniel had cleared his calendar without telling anyone why. After breakfast, Naomi brought out a shoebox from her room. Inside were drawings, stories, folded papers, pieces of herself she hadn't known where to put. "I want to show you something," she said. They sat on the living room rug, backs against the couch. Naomi pulled out a drawing of a school hallway, the walls tall and closing in. In the corner, a small figure stood alone, but in pencil lines barely visible. A door had been sketched open at the end. "I draw when I can't say things," she explained. "This is how it feels sometimes." Daniel studied it carefully. "And the door? That's how I hope it ends." He nodded, his chest tight. "Hope is a powerful thing." They spent the afternoon that way, talking, remembering. Daniel told her about his first job washing dishes, about a teacher who believed in him when no one else did. Naomi told him about the friends she wanted but didn't know how to keep, about the way words could feel like weights. Later, curled up on opposite ends of the couch, Naomi dozed off mid-sentence. Daniel didn't move. He watched her sleep, her face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in a long time. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that healing wasn't just possible. It was happening. But even as warmth settled into the room, a quiet truth lingered beneath it. Not every story of harm ends cleanly. Not every consequence arrives gently. And somewhere beyond their walls, the reckoning was still unfolding. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon, sharp and unexpected, slicing through the calm Daniel and Naomi had begun to rebuild. Daniel was in his study, reviewing documents, when his assistant's voice came through the speaker, hesitant, careful. "Mr. Carter, there's a situation. It's about Jefferson Prep." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Go on." "There's been a leak. Parents are divided. Some are supporting Naomi. Others are saying the school is being pressured because of who you are." Daniel closed his eyes. By the time Naomi came home that evening, the tension had already arrived ahead of her. She dropped her backpack by the door more forcefully than usual. "They were whispering again," she said. "But this time they weren't whispering about me being bad." Daniel looked up. "What were they saying?" "That I'm spoiled. That my dad is trying to ruin someone's life. That Mrs. Whitaker is the real victim." The words landed like glass. Daniel stood. "Naomi." "She apologized," Naomi blurted out. "Mrs. Whitaker, today, in front of the class." Daniel paused. "She did?" Naomi nodded, eyes glossy. "But it didn't feel real. She kept saying she was sorry if anyone misunderstood her intentions." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's not an apology." "I know," Naomi snapped, surprising herself. "But everyone clapped, and afterward, one girl told me I should be happy now, that I got what I wanted." She hugged her arms around herself. "I didn't want this." Daniel crossed the room and knelt in front of her. You wanted respect. But now everything's worse, Naomi whispered. I don't want to go back. I don't want to be the reason people are angry. Daniel felt the familiar pull of power rise inside him. The instinct to fix, to make a call, to end it. Instead, he stayed still. This is the hard part, he said quietly. When doing the right thing costs something. Naomi's voice broke. What if it keeps costing me? The question gutted him. That night, Daniel lay awake staring at the ceiling. He could make this disappear. Donations, pressure, influence. But he remembered his own childhood. The times adults had smoothed things over instead of standing firm. How injustice learned it could survive that way. In the next room, Naomi cried silently into her pillow, wondering if bravery was supposed to feel this lonely. By morning, both of them would have to choose. And neither choice would be easy. The school auditorium was full by the time Daniel arrived. Parents sat in tight clusters, murmurs rippling like undercurrents. Teachers lined the walls. The school board members occupied the front row, faces carefully neutral. Naomi sat beside Daniel, her feet barely touching the floor, hands folded so tightly in her lap her knuckles had gone pale. Dr. Reynolds stepped to the podium. This meeting is to address concerns regarding classroom conduct, student welfare, and community trust. A woman stood abruptly. This is about money, she said sharply. If any other parent complained, we wouldn't be here. A low hum of agreement followed. Daniel felt Naomi tense beside him. He leaned down and whispered, "Look at me." She did. Her eyes were wide, scared, searching. You didn't do anything wrong, he said softly. And you don't have to speak unless you want to. Dr. Reynolds called for order. Mrs. Whitaker has submitted a statement. The teacher stood, visibly smaller than Naomi remembered her. If my actions caused harm, she read stiffly, I regret that. Daniel listened carefully. It was careful language, legal language. Then he stood. The room quieted instantly. My name is Daniel Carter, he began. And before anything else, I want to be clear about something. This isn't about who I am. It's about who my daughter is allowed to be. He gestured gently to Naomi. She is a child. She deserves dignity without earning it through silence. A man scoffed. Easy to say when you can afford lawyers. Daniel met his gaze. I didn't bring lawyers, I brought the truth. He paused. I could have handled this privately. I didn't. Because what happened to Naomi happens every day to children whose parents don't have my resources. The room stilled. Naomi's heart pounded. Slowly she raised her hand. Daniel turned to her, surprised. Are you sure? She nodded. Naomi stood, voice shaking but clear. I don't want anyone fired because of me. I just want school to feel safe. Silence fell heavy and deep. Dr. Reynolds cleared his throat. Thank you, Naomi. In that moment, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Daniel sat back down, his chest tight with pride and fear all at once. He didn't know how this would end. Only that they had chosen Ruth over comfort. And now, the outcome was out of their hands. The decision came 3 days later. Daniel was at the breakfast table when Naomi patted in, her bracelet catching the morning light. The phone rang before either of them spoke. Dr. Reynolds' voice was steady. After a full review, Mrs. Whitaker's contract will not be renewed. Additionally, Jefferson Preparatory will implement mandatory bias training and an independent reporting system for students. Daniel exhaled slowly. Thank you. When he hung up, Naomi searched his face. She won't be teaching there anymore, he said gently. And things are going to change. Naomi nodded, absorbing it. Does that mean it's over? Daniel considered the question. It means it mattered. The following Monday, Naomi walked into a new classroom. New teacher, new energy. When she raised her hand, she was called on. When she spoke, she was heard. Weeks later, her essay was published in the school's literary journal. The title was simple: Scene. At the end of the year assembly, Naomi stood on stage, accepting an award for academic excellence and courage. As applause filled the room, she caught her father's eye. He nodded once, the same way he had in the classroom that day. Full circle. If this story moved you, ask yourself, where might your voice make a difference today? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if stories of justice, love, and quiet courage matter to you, subscribe to Golden Heart Stories and pass this along to someone who needs it. That night, as Daniel tucked Naomi in, she whispered, "Thank you for coming." He kissed her forehead. "I always will." And in a house that finally felt whole, both of them slept knowing something precious had been reclaimed. Dignity, love, and the certainty that when truth walks in the door, cruelty freezes.